Hello, this is Mr. O'Shaw from Daft Apple Games, and today I'm going to show you how to mod the Subnautica games. I'm going to start with just the Subnautica game. The principles apply to Below Zero in exactly the same way, but to keep things simple, we'll focus on the original Subnautica game. We're going to create a simple mod to change the damage of the knife in the game, and we're going to follow the steps in the tutorial that is available in a link in the description of this video. So first things first, if you'd like to know more about how to mod the Subnautica games, you can have a look at the online tutorial that you can see on my screen now, link below, and also visit the Subnautica modding Discord link in the tutorial, where you can ask questions and find out a bit more about how to mod these games. So let's get started then. What are we going to need? First things first, I am going to be modding on Windows. I'm not a Linux chap. So the assumption here is that you'll be using Microsoft Windows. We're going to use Visual Studio Community Edition. You may be able to use alternatives like JetBrains Rider or Visual Studio Code. We're going to use Visual Studio Community. To keep things simple, I have downloaded and installed Visual Studio already. I'm not going to go through the process of doing that. There is a section on the tutorial that talks about how to set up the Visual Studio environment, and that's quite important because you will have to select appropriate workloads in Visual Studio so that you can create the right type of output for a mod. So I suggest you have a look at the tutorial guide and go through that to install Visual Studio. Again, on the tutorial website, there are a number of tools and applications that you should download. I've downloaded DNSpy, which is a tool to allow us to investigate and analyze the source code of the game. I've downloaded the Bepinex pack from Nexus Mod. That is a patcher framework that's essentially doing all of the heavy lifting and allowing us to insert our code into the game. So we're going to need Bepinex. I've also downloaded a Bepinex Publicizer, which is a tool that essentially unlocks locked methods and properties of objects in the game and gives us access to more stuff than if we didn't publicize the game DLLs. And I've also downloaded the Bepinex config manager, which allows us to present a UI to our users to allow them to tweak parameters of our mods. It's really useful. I've also downloaded Unity Explorer, which again is a really useful tool that allows you to analyze game content whilst the game's running. So you can have a look at various objects and properties and values. Really helpful in modding a game. And finally, I am using the Visual Studio templates that I have created, and you will find those on my GitHub, which is also linked in the tutorial website. So I've downloaded and installed these Unity mod templates, which basically gives you a bunch of boilerplate code in Visual Studio that will give you the framework for creating a Bepinex mod for the Subnautica games. So Visual Studio installed, templates installed. I've downloaded the plugins and tools that I mentioned before. So we are going to install those into the game and get started on making our mod. So I'm using Steam, a Steam version of Subnautica, so it's installed on my E drive, and I've just navigated to the installation folder for the Subnautica game. So first of all, I take the BepInEx installation that I downloaded from Nexus, I copy that and I paste it straight into the Subnautica game folder. So you'll be able to see now that in the root of that game folder with the Subnautica executable, you've got a BepInEx folder. Open that up, and in plugins, we'll install the configuration manager. So copy those DLLs straight into the plugins folder. Doesn't need to be in a folder of its own. That's configuration manager. We're going to get publicizer. That is in a folder. That's fine. Put publicizer in there. And we're going to put Unity Explorer in there too, just because I like it. Okay, so we've now got the BepInEx framework installed. We've got publicizer, we've got Explorer, we've got config manager. So what we want to do first is we want to run the game. So running the game will launch the BepInEx plugin manager, and that'll run the publicizer plugin, which will do its thing. So this is Unity Explorer. You see that here. Press F7 to hide that. If you press F1, you'll see the BepInEx plugin configuration manager, which we will come back to shortly. So we can now quit the game. Now, if we go back into the Subnautica folder and have a look in Subnautica data managed, you'll see that there are a bunch of files now that have been created by the publicizer for us to use that allow us access to game methods and functions. So that's it. We are ready. We are ready to create our mod. Okay, now we're going to create our Visual Studio project. So let's fire up Visual Studio. We'll create a new project. We'll use our Unity mod templates that I mentioned earlier. There is a guide to using those. Link is in the description. Click next, and we're going to call it Subnautica Knife Mod. Keep everything as it is. We're going to put it on the D drive dev, and we're going to create. So this will use the templates to give you some boilerplate code representative of a BepInEx plugin for the game. So first things first, we need to sort out these references. So the references in the project allow us to access various functions of the BepInEx framework and the game code. So we need to fix these yellow triangles. So I'm going to right click, add reference. Let's just clear those for now, and I'll show you. So what we need is from our Subnautica game folder, we are going to need from the BepInEx core, we're going to need Harmony and BepInEx. Harmony and BepInEx. Add those. Then we want to grab those publicized DLL. So Subnautica data managed. You see this publicized assembly folder. Let's add both of those. And then we need some core Unity DLLs. So let's add Unity engine. There it is, and Unity core module. Oops, where is it? There it is. Okay, click OK. and you'll see all of the yellow triangles disappear. So we can now have a look in the plugin code that was created by the templates. So no errors here. First things first, let's change the GUID. So this needs to be a unique identifier, unique amongst other mods. So this prevents any conflicts between mods from occurring. So typically you'd use a reverse domain type naming convention. I'm going to call this com.mroshaw Subnautica knife mod. You typically have your own name or handle or whatever in here to make this unique. Plugin name and the plugin version you can change and you can update as you release new versions of your plugin. There is a bunch of code in here that's provided by the template that allows you to add configuration options for your mod. We can choose to ignore that for now. So the next thing is to set some properties of the project. So we right click the project and go to properties, look at build events. What build events do is at the point that we compile our mod, Visual Studio will create a DLL file, and the post build events allow you to automatically copy, deploy those DLL files or DLL file to your game. So essentially it makes the mod live immediately as part of the build process. So I've got my Subnautica game installed on my E drive under Steam. So I just need to modify that, and I need to modify this. So essentially what this will do is it will look, and if it doesn't already exist, it will create a folder in my BepInEx plugins directory. So I can see that in here. That'll get created in here, and then it will copy the compiled mod DLL into that folder. So that will happen every time I build the project, which allows me to immediately test the mod in the game. Right, so Control S to save that. Let's save the code that we've modified with the GUID change, and then we can actually build this. So if we go to build solution, you'll see that the DLL has compiled and it's been copied. So if we go back to our Subnautica folder, you'll see that this folder has been created, Subnautica knife mod, and our mod DLL has been deployed. So we can go ahead and run the game again, and we should be able to see some interesting results. Unity Explorer can be toggled with F7, just so you know. Okay, so if we hit F1 to bring up the BepInEx configuration manager again, you'll see that our mod is now present. So that plugin, that template code that was created when we created our project has set up some basic configuration items here that, just for example, demonstration purposes, but you can see that the mod itself has been registered, it's been loaded, so we're looking good. We've got the basic mod up and running. It doesn't do anything at the moment, but it is there. So click outside and quit. So we've got our basic mod template. We've updated some of the properties. We've amended the automatic deployment scripts, so we can now start to think about how we're going to get this mod to do what we want. So this is where dnSpy comes in. So if we fire up dnSpy, dnSpy is just a download zip file. You just unzip it into location, links in the tutorial pages, open, and then we want to open assembly C#. This is basically the DLL that Unity creates with all the game code, in it. So if I open that, This basically gives me access to all of the Subnautica game code. So we wanted to mod the knife. So let's start off. We'll just do a quick search for class, or we can even put all of the above. We can say search for everything that has the word knife. So you can see here in green, there is a class called knife. So if we double click that, dnspy takes us to the code for the knife component. And we can expand this and we can see methods that are usable on that knife object, and we see properties. So these are things that we can look at and manipulate through our mod code. So you will see that there is a property here called damage. Damage is a float value and it's defaulted to 25. So that sounds like a prime candidate for our mod to increase the value of that when the knife is created. So that is a very good start. We've got the knife damage item here that we can use. Now, in order to inject our code, our mod code, into the knife object, we need to patch one of its methods. And typically, when we want to influence a component or an object at the point that it's created, we will be looking for one of Unity's core event methods, such as start or awake. So those are messages, those are methods that Unity invokes on all of its baseline components, monobehavior components. And those methods get triggered at the beginning of the life cycle of an object. So they're ideal methods to patch when we want to influence a game object when it's created. We can see that the knife does not expose a start or awake method here. So there's nothing really for us to patch in here, which is a shame. However, what we can also see is that the knife component, the knife class, is actually based off of or inherits from the player tool class. So this is basic C# inheritance. There is a class called player tool, of which knife is a child type, and knife inherits all of the properties and methods of player tool. So that sounds interesting. So if we double click player tool and we have a look into player tool, right, we've got lots more to play with. Lots more to play with on player tool, including an awake method, which is great. So awake is called at the very beginning of the player tool's life cycle, before the start method. So it's an ideal class method to patch. So when a knife instance is created, is instantiated, its base player tool await method will be called, and we can intercept that. We can patch that method at the point that the knife's created, and then within our patch code, we can influence the damage value of knife when it's created. So that gives us everything we need to create a mod. dnspy is amazing, and you will find all sorts of useful classes and methods and properties in here that you will utilize in your life as a modder. The player class being a kind of prime example of where there is a lot going on, and you can see the potential to make modifications that do all sorts of useful and exciting things. We're not going to go into that for now. We're going to focus on patching in our knife damage. So we've got player tool, we've got the knife class, we've got the damage value, and we've got the wake method. Perfect. So let's come out of dnspy and let's go back into our mod. So the template creates a patch class as part of the boilerplate code. These classes work using the Harmony patching tool, which is part of the BepInEx, used by the BepInEx patching framework, and this allows us to intercept these class methods and hook in our own code. So what we are going to do is we're going to modify this to do what we want to do, which is to patch the player tool. And there we go. Visual Studio has been very helpful. So we're going to patch type player tool. We are going to prefix the player tool awake method. So Harmony has more than two, but for our purposes, there are two specific use cases for Harmony that we'll typically use, which is a prefix, which basically allows you to run code before the base method is run, so we can do stuff before the code is executed, and a postfix, which unsurprisingly comes after the base code is run. So what we want to do is we want to say, when the player tool awake method runs, before it does anything, we want to patch our knife our knife class. So you'll remember that knife is a subclass of player tool. So the first thing we need to do is we need to check to see if this is a knife. So other components may inherit from player tool, and we don't want to mess with those. We're only interested in the knife class. So every time a player tool is instantiated, this method will be called when the component wakes up. So we don't want to mess with any of those other ones. We're only interested in instances of the knife. So if we say, let's say this, we are basically saying if the instance of the player tool that is triggering this awake method is of type knife, then we want to do something. Otherwise, we basically return true and allow the method to continue. So what we're going to say is type of knife. So let's then grab the knife instance as knife. Okay. So we've now got access to the actual knife itself that's been instantiated. When you're using Harmony, an underscore instance of the type that you're patching as a parameter to a patch method will give you access to the actual instance that is in context as part of this method call. So this gives you access to the object that is being initialized in this awake method, which is great because we can then access its properties and its methods and do whatever it is that we want. So here we're effectively casting that as a knife so that we can then do what we want to do. So let's tweak it then. So let's say knife damage equals knife damage times 2. So it's a float, don't forget. So we want to treat it as a float, so that will effectively change the damage property of the knife when it's instantiated there, and give us what we want. So we can then effectively say return true. This would just allow the method to continue. And we want it to continue because we still want it to initialize the knife object and any other objects that are of type player tool that come through this method. So this is basically allowing us to tweak that property of the knife and increase its damage potential as part of our patching. So we can get rid of the rest of this boilerplate code and we can compile our mod again. So there we go. That's overwritten the DLL in our game plugin folder. We're just about ready to test. So before we do, let's add some logging so that we can be confident in what we're doing. So what we'll do is we will log the knife damage before. We'll log that prior to making our change, and then we'll say knife damage after we've made the change to double the damage to apply a modifier. Okay, so what we're going to do is we'll log whenever we're in the awake method. Now remember, this will trigger for all player tools, not just the knife, so we should see many instances of this where we'll just skip doing anything because they won't be of type knife. When we do get hold of a knife, we're going to modify the damage. So let's rebuild. That's deployed. Okay, let's play the game. F7 to close. Okay.
Passing 100 meters. Oxygen efficiency decreased.
So we'll equip our knife and we'll have a go at this sand shark. Have it! He's not happy with that, is he? Okay. So let's F1 to open the BepInEx configuration manager, and we can actually open the log directly from here. And we can have a look and see what's going on here. So you'll see a bunch of stuff that we're not interested in. But what you will see is some logging information from our mod. So as you can see, the player tool is being invoked many times. There are a number of objects in the game that inherit from that class, but we've not done anything. There's nothing about a knife here, so we've skipped over those because they're not of knife type. We do see some invocations to player tool awake for a knife, so we must have two instances in the game. Probably got one in inventory and one equipped, but you can see that before we ran our patch code, the knife damage was 20, and now that we've tweaked it, the damage is now 40. Okay, so this is working. This is great. We've got a mod that doubles the knife damage. Let's make this a bit more useful for our players. So come out the game, close the log file. Let's go back into our code. So if we go back into our plugin, you might remember that we got some sample configuration settings with our project template. So we're going to use these to we're going to use these to allow the user to change the damage modifier. So damage is a float, so we're going to keep the example float configuration. We are going to rename that to knife damage modifier. So what we want to say here is that, sorry, what we'll call it multiplier to make it clear. So we'll multiply the knife damage by this value, and we're going to call that knife damage modifier key. This allows BepInEx to keep unique configuration entries in its config files and allow you to clearly identify values and allow users to change them. So we want to call it something sensible. We can now get rid of those. So this is essentially the key for the config entry. This is the config entry itself. So we're also going to refactor that, and we're going to rename it, and we're going to call it knife damage multiplier. And oh, sorry, we didn't want to do that. We want to call that knife damage multiplier key. Didn't we? So let me rename that again. And then we want to call this knife damage multiplier. So let's do that. Knife damage multiplier. Okay, that's better. Okay, we can get rid of these examples because we're only interested in our float. And we also are not going to use a keyboard shortcut, so we can get rid of that. And at this point, we're not really bothered about what happens when the user changes the value at runtime. What's going to happen here is if the value is modified, it's only going to take effect when a new knife is instantiated. So the user's probably going to have to save and restart for any changes to take effect. You can use these config setting change events to allow your mod to update all of your existing knife objects should the user change the damage settings. We are not going to cover that in this tutorial. That can be something for you to pick up and try to do yourself. So what we've now got is a damage multiplier, we've got a damage multiplier key, and we've got a config entry to tie them together. So we want to have a default value of 1. It's really important to set this. If you have default value of 0, the knife is going to do no damage by default, and people are going to get annoyed. So default value of 1. Acceptable range, you want to do 1 to 10 as well. If you put it 0, that'll allow your player to effectively set the damage to 0, which you don't want to do. So acceptable value range lets you effectively manage the values that are possible in the BepInEx config settings. And then we want to give it a sensible name, so we're going to call it knife damage multiplier, and this will appear multiplier. This will appear in the BepInEx config screen. So we've got a config entry that allows our player to select a specific multiplier value. So we need to then refer to that in our patch. So you'll remember here we took the knife damage and we multiplied it by 2. So let's get rid of that, and what we want to say is what we will do is, just for the purposes of making things clear, we could make this simpler, but we're going to do it anyway like this just to show you. So damage multiplier equals, so this this config entry here is a static. Sorry, no, it is a where is it? Yes, it is. Sorry, yes, it is a static property of the class. So we can say Subnautica knife plugin dot damage multiplier, and then we use value to get the actual value from the config entry. So this is basically grabbing that damage multiplier from the configuration set by the player, or default, which is defaulted to 1. So what we'll do is let's go back and let's set the default to 5, just because then it'll give us a better example off the cuff. So we've got a default of 5, and the patch grabs the damage multiplier and multiplies the knife damage by that value. Okay, so what we should see now is whatever value the user has selected in that property will now be applied to the knife damage. There's simplifications you can do here, by the way, but I just want to make it really clear for beginners. We could definitely make this simpler, but we're not going to at this point. So that is our next iteration. We should be able to save and compile. So let's rebuild, and it's been deployed. So we can now fire up the game. Okay, if you press F1 to bring up the mod, the BepInEx config manager, you can now see that our configuration items have changed, and you'll see the name, and the value of our configuration item. So you can set this to whatever you want. It's default to 5. Let's put it at 8, and we'll make it badass, shall we? Oops. I tell you, this is fiddly. I must admit. Okay, so value is 8. Okay, let's go ahead and hit play.
Passing 100 meters. Oxygen efficiency decreased.
Right, let's go and kick this guy's ass. So let's have a look, and let's see what's occurring. So we should see all of our stuff again, all of these calls, and okay. So knife damage defaults 20, and as you can see with our new modifier, the damage is now 160. So that is going to do some serious damage. We can also verify this in Unity Explorer. So F7 to bring up Unity Explorer. If you search for knife in here, you'll see the instance of the knife that the player's holding here. You'll also see the instance in inventory. This is why we saw 2 entries. So let's have a look at that knife class there, and you'll see the damage value is 160. So we've influenced that as part of our mod, and we can check in Unity Explorer that the changes taken effect. So let's come out of that. Let's quit the game. Are you sure? Yes. And that concludes the tutorial on modding the Subnautica games. I hope you found this useful. Do look in the description for links to modding resources and the Subnautica modding Discord. I hope to see many of you on the Discord asking questions. I hope to see some new and exciting game mods being produced. Please do come onto the Discord and ask questions. Lots of helpful people around, and we hope to see you there. Thank you for watching, and good luck with your modding in the future.